Episode 4 of The Acolyte Day has brought us back to the present day. We've now heard and seen at least some of the broad strokes of what happened in the past of May and Osha. And this episode takes both of the characters to Kafar, the planet that Kelnaka has been stationed on. May is still on her task to kill the 4 Jedi Masters who are on Brendok, but we learn something new about her task to kill a Jedi without a weapon. It turns out this did not mean that she has to not be using a weapon when she kills the Jedi. Instead, it's a test to make her kill an unarmed Jedi. This, I think, makes it a bit more clear what the test is for. It's basically a final way to push May over to the dark side, and finding out that Osha was alive seems to be something that's giving her second thoughts about everything she's doing. So, well, in this episode, Osha is afraid of facing May and facing her past, as Master Soul puts it. May is kind of latching onto this chance to rebuild. We saw in episode 3 how much more attached she was to Osha than Osha may have been to her, particularly in making sure the trajectory of their lives kept them together all the time, and now, after such a long period of thinking Osha was dead, that's something that she can latch back onto. So she lures Chimera into the trap, luring in the Jedi at the same time, and tries to turn herself into Kelnaka, unfortunately finding out that he has already been killed. This is basically the 3rd time that the Jedi are going to potentially think that someone killed someone for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, even though May did say she was going to kill Kelnaka, or at least she was acting towards it and the Jedi knew that. But we already had the situation where Osha was believed to have killed Indara because they didn't know May was alive, and then they have when Osha walks into the room where Torben had been killed, although in that case Yord immediately speaks up for her. But to me it feels a bit like using a plot device that they've already used and kind of retreading that ground. This is probably going to be the most impactful of those though, where May will probably now feel like she has nowhere she can turn and that no one's going to believe her. Even though I think Osha and Soul probably would if she had just come forward at that moment, especially when our presumed Sith Lord is right behind them after it happens. This episode did also put me a bit more in the camp of Chimera is probably that Sith, and to me, the guy in the helmet's proportions just look so much more like Manny Jacinto's than anyone else's. Out of the characters we already know, the only one I could think of who could possibly apply is Mother Coral, since she wasn't in the pile of bodies at the Coven at the end of episode 3. But I've also seen some people say that Star Wars fans just shouldn't speculate about this stuff because look at what happened with, for example, Merrick or all the theories behind Tech being alive. You're just going to disappoint yourself. But to me, I speculate about this stuff because it's fun. I don't expect to be right all the time or even necessarily some of the time. I think if you get really wrapped up in what your theories are, then you might be setting yourself up for disappointment. But there's nothing wrong with looking at what's there and seeing what you can figure out from that. But in this situation, Chimera knows so much about May's master, about what May is doing, about the Jedi. He's been to these places before, and then he poorly tries to play off that he doesn't know who Soul is. And I think that interaction is part of what makes May think that she's being set up in some way, that she doesn't have all the information that perhaps Chimera has. There were a lot of instances of either weird dialogue or weird line delivery in this episode, but I think that particular episode, while it did seem kind of stilted, was done intentionally in that way because Chimera was hiding something and was asking a question that just wasn't genuine. But to go back to the possibility of it being Mother Coral, I kind of have her as a distant second. I think her biggest role is going to be when we get back to flashbacks. So to me, it seems far more likely that whatever she did had more to do with why the Jedi were in the Covenant that night and why Soul was able to find May and Osha, rather than her necessarily having anything to do with what's going on in the modern period. I'm really not sure where May's story is going to go in the immediate future from here though, so I'm really interested to see what happens. Whether she still succeeds in turning herself into the Jedi, or she gets perhaps taken by her former master, maybe even feeling cornered into having to serve him again. The final thing I want to talk about for the episode is our second major cameo after Vernestra Rwoh. We have officially seen Ki-Adi-Mundi in The Acolyte. He was definitely not the Jedi Council member I would have guessed we would see. Of course, he is not yet a Jedi Council member. I just mean not the prequel era Jedi Council member I thought we would see. But it does add some other dimensions to how much the Jedi actually learn about the Sith in this period, and whether that information makes it back to the rest of the Jedi that were in that conference room. If they do end up learning about this being a Sith, does that mean that Ki-Adi was actually involved in some kind of cover-up? But keep in mind, seeing a red lightsaber doesn't automatically mean Sith. If it did, then there wouldn't have been the pushback in episode 1 in the first place about Darth Maul actually being a Sith. The other thing I've seen some confusion about is why Ki-Adi is around at this point, since he was supposedly about 60 years old in episode 1. That information, however, was only true in Legends. We actually don't have a canon birth date for him or a canon lifespan for Syrians, his species. The 93 BBY figure came from the Episode 1 Insider's Guide CD-ROM from LucasArts, as well as a Topps trading card from before the reboot, which was based on extrapolation from that Insider's Guide. So this is simply a piece of Legends information which didn't make it over to canon, that's all. All in all, while I still preferred Episodes 1 and 2 to this, I did enjoy the episode, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.